Welcome to another Guild Wars 2 video. This game is a lot of fun when it comes to tinkering with your build. It's set up in such a way that it gives you a lot of creative control and freedom to mix and match different perks with your active abilities and weapons, and doesn't punish you for experimenting, going outside of the norm or maybe the meta, and allowing you to try out new builds on a whim. It's because of this fact that I have quite literally spent a couple hours at a time just going over my build and making sure it works completely and entirely with whatever weapons or skills that I choose. I do this a bit for the PvE, but I mainly do it for the PvP, as I am a hyper-competitive person by nature. So in my many hours of doing just that, I decided to take a build that I like to use currently for the warrior and share it with you guys, because I like to theory craft and I'd like your feedback on the build as well, because it works for me on a lot of levels. And while it does have some drawbacks, I do find myself winning the majority of my 1v1 duels, and even some 2v1 scenarios, depending on a couple of factors, of course. Now, this build for the warrior is for those who have the expansion Heart of Thorns. If you don't have the expansion, and I get around to it, I may do some builds that are just for the original content. So first I'm going to tell you guys what I use in terms of weaponry, what I swap out to, the skills on my toolbar, and then we'll get into the specializations, and I'll tell you what and why I choose what I choose. With the Heart of Thorns expansion, I make heavy use of the new specialization that came along with the warrior, the Berserker, allowing you to use torches in your offhand and change your burst skills into primal burst skills, granting new effects. And when it comes to my warrior, I'm a fan of quick attacks, critical attacks, and condition damage like burning and bleeding. So as you might be able to guess, my first weapons of choice are the sword in the main hand and the torch in the offhand, with either a rifle or a longbow to back me up in case I need to do some long range or mid range damage. I also make heavy use of the new rage skills that come with the Berserk specialization. So diving into what's on my toolbars, I find that the sword and torch combination gives me a lot of effective bleed and burn damage, on top of being able to stack up crits thanks to the specializations that I will get into in just a little bit. I especially like the sword's primal burst skill for what it does, allowing you to shoot out piercing fireballs that do a lot of burn damage, on top of getting rid of a few conditions on yourself. And as for the second skill bar, I use a variety of skills that do a combination of crowd control as well as defense. The first skill that I use is the healing skill, and this is a shout called To the Limit. It heals myself and also regains all of my adrenaline. Nearby allies gain endurance too, but I find the heal, even for the longer cooldown and the 1 second cast time, is a very substantial heal, effectively giving me almost half of my health back, on top of extra endurance to maybe do another dodge, and of course a full bar of adrenaline, which has a host of other benefits. The next skill on the bar is one of the new rage skills called Wild Blow. I mean, it's not new relatively, but for the expansion it is. Anyway, you gain adrenaline and then lash out with a critical attack that launches your target and knocks them down and away, which is quite nice. It also removes blind as well as feeble conditions. The damage and burning damage is respectable, especially since it's a guaranteed 100% critical hit. But I really like the crowd control, as well as the small bit of adrenaline that you get from it. My next skill of choice is the physical skill, Stomp. This is really handy in not only breaking any stun on your character, but also giving you 5 seconds of stability per enemy struck with the attack. And what it does is it does a little bit of damage, but it launches you in the air and then you slam down, knocking everybody back, which is very, very useful in interrupting an enemy while they're pushing or attacking or really going through their combos. It interrupts everybody and you come out on top for it. And while it does have a longer cooldown, it is, in my eyes, very essential to interrupting the enemy's flow of combat. Now for my next skill, you'll notice in the video that I use a skill called Balanced Stance, and this allows me to basically get around a little bit faster as well as to not get knocked down. But I've since switched that out with something I feel is something more effective for what I do in battle, and that's called Endure Pain. It's on a 30-second cooldown, and it's also a stance where you take no damage from attacks for 2 seconds. And while you are still susceptible to conditions and control effects, the rest of this build should do a decent job of softening the blow a bit. And finally, when it comes to the elite skill, I am kind of torn between two skills in particular. One is a skill from the original game called Rampage. It's a physical skill where you transform into a massive juggernaut. It has a very long cooldown, but you get a lot of damage reduction, you get increased movement speed, you get stability where you can't be stunned or knocked down or anything. And a host of other changes. You get a bunch of new skills that you can use that do a ton of damage as well as crowd control, and it's just a great tool for taking down one or two people pretty quickly and effortlessly while the transformation is still active. And then there is the much shorter cooldown skill that's part of the expansion called Headbutt. It's a rage skill where you stun your target, deal a decent amount of physical and burning damage, gain a ton of adrenaline, and then stun yourself. The thing is, you only stun yourself for 1 second. They get stunned for 3 seconds, and you can use it to get out of a stun. And if it weren't for the Headbutt's 25-second cooldown, which is just so short for what it does and how great it is, it wouldn't be really hard to choose at all. And now we get to the specializations. So you already know that I use the Berserker specialization because I use a torch, so let's dive into that. In the first column, I use Savage Instinct, where activating Berserk mode breaks stuns and removes 2 conditions. I find that is definitely useful. So it's all about finding that balance between offense and defense, so that you can stay alive long enough to really do some damage. In the second column of choosable stuff, I use Heat the Soul, which reduces recharge on torch skills and gain condition damage when wielding a torch. So yeah, my torch stuff is just going to be even better. My burns are going to burn harder, my bleeds are going to bleed longer and harder as well. And then finally, in the final column, King of Fires, which increases the duration of the burning damage that you apply. You gain a fire aura when you critically hit an enemy, which will be a lot, and then Berserker skills detonate that fire aura, damaging and burning nearby foes. So you do a ton of burning damage, you get the fire shield, and you get the burning duration increase in AoE. It is so great. And yeah, it's on a 15-second cooldown, but it's going to happen a lot, and it's going to be awesome. The other 2 specializations that I use are a mix of offense and defense, so we'll start with the one that's literally called defense. In the first column, I use Dogged March, where your incoming movement impeding conditions have their durations reduced. You gain regeneration when you are affected by one of these conditions, which is a heal, by 780 every second, which is quite nice. So cripple, chilled, immobilize, all of that is reduced by 33%. Pretty good. In the next column, I use Endure Pain, where once you've hit 50% of your health threshold, every 60 seconds, Endure Pain, which is a skill that you already use, will activate again. So yeah, that's another 2 seconds that you aren't going to be taking end damage, and it breaks a stun, just in case you are stunned. And in the final column, I choose Balanced Stance. What this does is it activates Balanced Stance, the skill, when you are dazed, knocked down, launched, stunned, or really anything, increases the stance durations, which means your Endure Pain stance, the one you use and the one that's activated automatically, will last that 0.75 seconds longer than normal, or half second longer, which is great. And it gives you Vigor, which gives you 6 seconds of 50% increased endurance regeneration. The skill itself, Balanced Stance, makes sure that you can't be knocked down and all that for about 3 seconds. Gives you movement speed on a loop for about 9 seconds, or 10 seconds, and it breaks stuns. Then there's the final specialization of my build. The butter to the bread of what I find makes what I do successful, and that is arms. The arm specialization focuses on the sword, focuses on bleeding, and focuses on critical chance, which is great because I like all 3 of those. So in the first column, I use Signet Mastery. This casts Signet of Might whenever you hit someone who is at 50% or below. And what that does is for 6 seconds, makes your attacks unblockable and gives you 100 precision. Next column, I use Blade Master, where sword skills have an increased critical hit chance by 20%, and all of the sword skills are reduced by 20% as well. So this is just great all around. There is literally nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And then the final column, burst skills have an increased critical chance of 100%, which is super nice when you are throwing those burning, really damaging fireballs to people, and it does a lot of damage. Even your regular burst or primal skills with the rifle or with the bow are going to be so potent and powerful with this particular selection. Now, when it comes to using the right loot on your character for this particular build, you're going to want to go with power, precision, maybe some toughness, because you don't want to be all glass cannon. It's not going to end out very well. If you want more damage for your bleed and your burning, then go condition damage. With this build, you're going to be doing a lot of damage. You're going to be able to chase your opponent and CC them into the dirt, and then if you get crowd controlled in return, you have multiple ways to break out of it and then turn the tables again and again and again. The only downsides, I'd say, are lack of a lot of heals, and if you get 2v1'd, especially by somebody with a short bow and they're using those abilities that just tear you to shreds instantly, if you get hit with a lot of damage quickly, it's not going to be pretty for you. But I mean, that can be said for, really most builds out there. You're also not going to be incredibly mobile, as some other classes might be, because you don't have a movement speed skill, on hand. Like, maybe you can use the dashing lunge attack with the sword every 6 seconds or so, but that's pretty much it. So that's another downfall of this build. But once you do get into combat, even if it takes you a couple seconds to catch up, you'll be able to stay with it for sure. And that pretty much sums up my build for the warrior. I find that it fits my playstyle, and if it doesn't fit yours, then I'm sure you can find some way to tweak it so that it does. Let me know what you think in the comments down below about this build, about Guild Wars 2 PvP, or really anything related to that. That'd be fine. We'll have a discussion about it. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, you know what buttons to press to make me happy. Thank you very much for supporting my channel, and I will catch you next time.